Welcome to Women Winning Divorce with your host, Heather Quick. Heather brings over 20 years of law experience that advocates and empowers women to achieve happier and healthier lives. Each week, we provide knowledge and guidance on different aspects of family law to help lead women through the difficult and emotional legal challenges that they are facing. Listen in as she discusses issues including divorce, custody, alimony, paternity, narcissism, mediation, and other family law issues to provide insight on the journey of women winning divorce. Welcome to the show. I'm Julie Morgan, and I'm joined by your host, Heather Quick. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Julie. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. You know, you got me with another topic. I looked at this, I said, what is that? I've never heard of that. Okay, so I know I'm not the only one. Let's tell everyone what that is. What is a gray divorce?
So I don't know how long ago this became popular, but probably at least about maybe 10 years ago, because really, I think they saw a spike in the baby boomers divorcing. And so with that, they decided to call this, gray divorce, meaning gray hair, associating it with gray hair, which is, thank you very much. You can call mine a blonde divorce because I'm not going gray. I will tell you that right now. Now, I didn't. Julie liked that one. I know you liked that one.
Yes, I really did. I pulled them all out. I'm just like, you know what? I'd rather be bald. I can't do this. But anyway, gray, you said gray hair. So with this, also, you think about a certain age as well?
Yes. And this was based on statistics, Census Bureau, which we know delays a little bit, but it's just showing this high divorce rate for couples between 55 and 64. And I do continue to see that. That is just an age group that really, in the past, I would even say 10 years, we've just really seen an increase in divorce in that particular demographic.
What are some of the reasons? Because it seems like this could possibly be a specialty as well, right? Divorce. But anyway, what are some of the reasons?
Yes, and there are, you will now, if you Google it, you'll find that, and you'll see there are many topics and things that address that specific demographic. But if we look at, those individuals who were married, that long ago and are in this age demographic, it coincides with a lot of things. One, probably children leaving the home. That last child leaves home. Parents are, in their 50s maybe, and then it's just such a change in the dynamic between the two and it may not happen right away. Sometimes it happens right away. They're like, I waited to get that last child to college and I'm done, and they're here, a few months later. Other times it may be a few years after that it's like, it's just changed now that the kids are gone and it's harder to keep it together. And, there's also, I think, a change now than even 20, 30 years ago that it's okay. And what I think the statistics do show is that there are more women filing for divorce in these age groups than men. And I think that's because it's more accepted, and maybe now they're realizing like, I don't want to stay in this anymore. I've got another 20, 30 years left in my life, and this is not how I want to spend it.
There's something to be said about that, especially now, people making different changes in their lives. And also I think about, just what you mentioned, people, they're living longer. So if they're over 50, I know you mentioned 20 or 30 years, but they could possibly live even longer. And they're thinking, this is not what I want for my life in the second half of it.
I think that's so true. And I would, yes, there's the reality of that. And many times, those first 20 years of marriage, and you're really busy building a family, wealth, community. There's a lot going on. And then when things may begin just to change, especially I think it's very notable and real to say when the children leave, but things start to happen. And then as we age, I think we get more perspective as we lose loved ones, parents, things. you really get a perspective that's different and that gives you more clarity on how you want to spend that future. And I also think that a lot of men get really grumpy and women just like, I don't want to be with them anymore. Like they really are turning into that grumpy old man. And I am like, feel rejuvenated. And here I don't have to sit here and take care of kids all day, ready to go have fun. And they're a grouch. So I said it.
I know I'm not the only one laughing. I can't be.
Well,
So,
and it's because it's true.
yeah,
It's true. And it could
yeah.
be, hey, it could be the reverse. But I obviously have a perspective where I talk to more women and I see it. And I just, I notice that it's a similar thing.
Another thing I thought about is they just don't have anything in common anymore. They've grown apart, possibly because he may have always been at the office. She was at home with the kids. They started to have different likes and dislikes.
Absolutely. I think that's a very common reason. And it's really growing apart during the marriage. And it happens not intentionally, but then sometimes, you're like, well, I have more fun with my friends and with the kids, and I don't need to make that much of an effort. But then when it's just the two of you, yeah, you may find like, gosh, I don't really know this person anymore, or I do know this person, and I just don't like them anymore.
We said the same thing at the same time. I just don't like them anymore. Yeah. And you think, why am I here? Like, what am I doing? What's going on here?
Agreed. And, when you're in a relationship like that, and there are so many extremes, and, I know sometimes it can be difficult because a woman's like, well, hey, he's not a bad person. You can always justify all the reasons why this may not be a good, that I shouldn't leave. And I'm not advocating one way or another, but I do think that we all have, something to give back to this world. And when we're not, surrounding ourselves with people who help make us better, we really are doing a disservice to everybody. And that works both ways in the relationship. And that's why you have to work at it. And sometimes it's so much work that after this point in time, you're like, I just don't have it in me anymore. I feel like I'm doing all this work and it's not getting better.
Something that continues also to come up in our conversations whenever I think about any of these topics is therapy. It seems like the need to have therapy after a situation like this, it seems like a therapist may be a good idea.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you are going through this is another major life transition. And I think it's always a great idea to have a sounding board to work through those feelings and the changes and, how your identity really shifts. We all identify ourselves in one way or another or in more than one way. But when you're married, you identify yourself as married. And now you aren't. And if that's been a big part of who you are, therapy will be helpful because there's going to be changes and, you want to go through that and embrace it in a healthy way.
And I understand that you, when you talk to clients, you talk to them about legal issues, right? Legal things. But if someone comes in and they're looking to get a divorce later on in life, how do you set this up as far as the things that they have to think about at that time? Because it seems like it's even more than they would have to think of if they were younger.
I think, we got to break it down, because everybody's going to be at a different spot. And I think that that's where therapy can be so helpful, which is why we do suggest that, because they can, with a therapist, you can work through the issues as they come up. They can meet you where you are. Whereas from the legal perspective and that process, it happens in the way it happens. And, in particular, and even if you're not, if you're not the one advocating or the one wanting this divorce, you're going to have a different approach and a different, emotional state than somebody who does want it. Because if you are moving forward and you're initiating the process for divorce, well, clearly you've thought this through, and you're at acceptance, some level of acceptance within yourself, because, you haven't engaged, your spouse in usually all that thought process, but you're already there. And that sometimes is the difference when the person who's served with the divorce, they're not privy to your thoughts and all these decision makings that got you to acceptance before them. So it's just, there's just more to deal with than the person who's initiating it.
And that person that's initiating it, they've already considered some of the factors that you need to consider when you're thinking about a great divorce. Number one,
hopefully, most likely.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, because number one always really goes back to money. At least that's what I believe. It feels like it goes back to money. So when we talk about some of the factors to consider in a great divorce, finances, what do you have to think about in terms of finances?
Well, and there's a lot, it's really like, well, there's, the division of the assets, and, if there's a home and now there's no minor children, many times that's a large asset for individuals and that might need to be sold, even though one person may really want to stay there. But if there's a lot of equity, and if you're, at this time, in 2022, there's a booming real estate market for those selling, not so much those buying. So, there's a lot of factors there to think about. And, well, how close are you to retirement? What type of money is in retirement? How will it be divided? Just because, one spouse worked the whole marriage and you didn't, doesn't mean that retirement's not yours, that you get half of it. How is that going to play out? So I think those are some good things that, and issues financially that, we think through.
Heather, have we talked about that? Because I'm confused. You're telling me that my retirement I have to share with someone that I'm divorcing?
Yes, Julie, if you have been married, during the time you've been putting that money away, all that money you've earned during the marriage is marital. So you put in, you've got $500,000 in your IRA that was all earned during that 20-year marriage. That's getting split in half. I can see that look on your face. You are shocked.
That hurts.
Yes. I have heard those thoughts before.
Because I'm thinking, I went to work and I stood behind a microphone day in and day out. And This is my voice that has really been used to the full. And you're telling me that my 401k, my IRA, all of the above will go to someone that did not do that work?
Yes. Now, again, if you're married during all that time, maybe they were married during a part of that, then it's, it'll have a marital component. But yes, and when you are married, everything you earn and everything your spouse earns is marital. Everything you save during that marriage is marital, and everything that he saves, everything that, he incurs debt for is marital, just like you. So when I say, when we talked about in those shows previously about how the finances are intertwined and having an understanding of that prior to getting married, that's why that's so important.
We gotta revisit that, Heather. We do. We have to revisit.
I know, because it hasn't sunk in yet. We've been doing the show for weeks, months, and I didn't know you didn't know that yet.
We talked about it. I'm starting to have gray hair, so I forgot.
Well, you know what, Julie? You know what that is? You hear what, not only really what you want to hear, but really what applies. And that is a very good example. We may have, I'm sure it's come up. Yeah. And, it wasn't something you were focused on, or we didn't really drill down. And that's the way it is for for many people. Even when we have multiple conversations, they don't always hear it at that time.
You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. All right, Heather. So we talked about one of the factors to consider in a great divorce, finances. I am pretty positive we can keep on going with that one. And you know what? Let's do that. It's important, and it seems like at different stages. I mean, this is just wild. A financial advisor or an accountant. It's really good to have this person right next to you.
Oh, absolutely. Because, even, and it's great. Hey, very many people are very, savvy, and they have a good understanding of everything that exists. But as the assets grow and as there are more things to consider when, we're going through and dividing the assets, and hey, how are they equal? A cash account is not of say $100,000 isn't equal to a IRA of $100,000 because you don't have access to both equally, except depending on your age and what's going to happen, based on the age when you can begin to tap into that. So it's really important indeed to have those experts, advisors, because again, you're understanding, because at the end of this divorce, now you are in charge of what you have. And so you are going to want to surround yourself with those individuals who are going to really advise you and help you.
Because you have to think about it. If you are not at retirement age, there are so many factors to consider if you're trying to cash some stuff out.
Indeed, because there's going to be penalties and taxes. And so again, we've talked about this in episodes previously, like what are your plans? What do you want? Things of that nature. It's important to have those discussions with your attorney, because that will influence, hey, what assets mean the most to you? How do we get you best situated? If we're dividing everything 50-50, that may sound very simple, but for some reason it's not always that simple, and it's not that straightforward, and there's got to be negotiations and understanding, hey, which assets do you want?
So after you've talked to someone, and we talked about this before on another episode of Women Winning Divorce. If you want to listen back to previous episodes, please go to our website, womenwinningdivorce.com. We've talked about asking that question, what do you want? What do you want out of this? What is your end game? I think about a great divorce, and I'm thinking, I need to understand my end game sooner rather than later.
Yes, absolutely. Now, and, if you haven't worked, then yes, you really need to think about it. If you're the spouse who hasn't worked, and then your, spouse, let's say, hey, maybe they're going to work another 5, maybe 10 years. What's the impact of that? And, for most individuals in their career, once they hit their 50s, they really basically hit their stride, and they're really going to make a lot more money. So it's important that if you are, not the high earner or not the earner spouse, you understand, that position. And then, hey, if you are the breadwinner, so many women have that exact reaction that you had about sharing their money. I think men are resolved. That's probably what's going to happen. But women see it differently. And not that I don't agree, but I also suggest to them, all right, well, do you want to share a bigger part of the pie? Or if you want divorce now and want to move on with your life, do it now, cut your losses. You're going to make it back. If you're in a career that's, in that trajectory, if you've been the breadwinner. And so it's important, though, on whatever side you're looking at this from, that you are understanding the end game. And I do think that most women that I meet that are really in this stage, they have They've really thought it through because they're at a point they've invested maybe half their life in this relationship, and they really want to do something else with the other half. And they've really thought it through, and they've gotten clarity on what matters most to them, which of course, I mean, we know you need money to survive and make things go along, but many times there's a lot of clarity there for those women.
Okay, I have a question. So
Yes.
let's go back. Think back to our show on prenups and postnups. Is it possible to put in the prenup, you can't get any of my 401k?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Think ahead. Think ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Alrighty.
I know that made you happy.
It did.
I know that did. I can see that you're now okay.
I am. I really am. I really am. So let's talk about health insurance because again, at this stage in life, it's necessary. So how does that work out?
That is a big concern for a lot of people. I mean, absolutely. And I understand that, and particularly if you've had any pre-existing conditions and you're worried, like how am I going to have health insurance if I get divorced? And I'm not, because Medicare kicks in at 65. Maybe I'm not there yet. How is that all going to come down? And that is a question and a fear / concern of many women that we work with them on, because COBRA, if you're familiar, that is and not all employers even offer that. So that's got to be the one thing. It tends to be if it's a large company. But if you get a divorce and you're like, I've got great health coverage through my husband's company, and I worry about that. And, we help them through different insurance brokers. We assist them in finding insurance for themselves. And I will tell you that's easier than it was 20 years ago, but that is going to be something that is going to be a new expense that they did not have before, or it was an expense. It was just coming out of maybe your husband's paycheck. Now that's going to be part of your need that is going to go into the overall alimony equation.
You said that you assist them with finding insurance. Is that something Susan does, or is I was just thought about Susan from, a previous show. So is that something she helps you with, or just anyone else?
Yes, our client liaison knows various different, insurance brokers, and we try to assist our clients in finding that out, because even before the divorce, it's important to know what type of insurance you're going to be able to get, what's that going to look like, and what's that cost. So yes, we definitely do that to get our clients set up and understanding what's going to be available to them.
Susan is busy.
She is busy. She, as our client liaison, she works with our clients on so many facets of the process, from before they even get started to when they're getting started to even afterwards. So yes, she fills a vital role in the firm.
Yeah. So if I haven't worked in 20, 30 years, that's another thing that I really need to take into consideration when in terms of alimony and how much I'm asking for, and then the house and all of that.
All of that. Right. And it's not that you need to have a decision one way or another, because you're not going to really understand maybe all the implications of everything, but that you recognize, okay, that's going to be a decision that's going to have to be made about health insurance. I'm going to have to really understand what is available to me, what that's going to cost. And, when we talk about the home, that can be one of the hardest things, particularly the longer you've been in a home. And it becomes something you can identify with, and you're comfortable, and it's going to be a big change, not only the divorce, but then moving when you've had, so much there. And, and it's a double-edged sword, I'll tell you, because let's say you've been in there a long time in the house and you've got a low mortgage. So you're like, well, I could maybe afford, but then you've also built up a lot of equity. So now that equity is to be shared. And, there are instances where on a balance sheet, it will appear dollars equal, but again, not all dollars are equal, and all that equity in that house is not going to pay the bills or buy gas or groceries. So a lot of these decisions are difficult, and you have to get real with what you're going to do. And sometimes the idea of a house sounds great. It does. And it's our house, and I want our kids, and I don't want anything changed. But things are changing. And change can be hard, but it can be great. And it can be very positive experience if you choose to look at it that way and move through that and reduce the amount of work that you might have to do in keeping, a home that, was for the family, large enough for everybody, that now is not really something that you need. And financially, it may make things harder on you. And these aren't decisions we make on the very first day or when you're thinking about the divorce. It evolves throughout the process, but it is. And it is a hard decision to make, I will tell you. It's hard for many men and women, and, on kind of giving up that residence.
Yeah, because the memories, they also won't pay for the expensive side of the home, all the
Exactly.
extras, even though that's what you think about. When they come into the office, that's probably what they're thinking about. They're thinking about, oh, I have to give up the house, and I brought home my first child while we were living in that house. That's possibly one of the first things that comes to their mind, but there are so many other things.
Yes. There are, and there's a lot, and it's normal, it's completely understandable on how, there's so many things. And again, and then there's, sometimes they're like, well, no, I want the money out of the house, but he loves this house. He's, this is his favorite place ever, but I want my money out of it. Or, and everybody has varying degrees of attachment. And it can be hard because those are emotional reasons, not rational reasons. It doesn't make them wrong or right, but as attorneys for our clients, our goal is to get them to see the reality of the situation. And that can be difficult sometimes. And that's, recognizing and trying really hard to get the client to see that it's an emotional reason, and realistically, maybe we need to sell the house because it's just, one, it doesn't make sense, and two, maybe there's just too much money in there that you're not going to be able to find other assets to pay off your other spouse, and that's what the court's going to do. Sometimes we're in a situation, it's like the court will order that sold, and it's a process of getting an acceptance of that reality. And it's scary, it's difficult, all of those things.
So the goal really is take away the emotional, which will be difficult. Think about the rational. The rational is understanding upkeep, mortgage, insurance, taxes, emergency repairs, everything.
Everything. And now, even if, You've been there, you've had to think of these things, but you had a partner that was both of your responsibilities. Now it's just going to be yours financially. And yeah, there's a lot. And it's not that I dissuade people at any point. Again, it's just helping really objectively make decisions by, doing the pros and cons, and let's look at it and really thinking more of where you're going to be in 3 years than just where you are right now and how hard something seems right now.
You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, the kids, we still have to think about them and they're adults, right?
True.
It's tough on them too, even as an adult.
It is. And sometimes it's even harder. And I can't tell you why, except that, they can verbalize, and just depending on where they are at that time in their life, and they just feel like, oh, now I have to deal with this. This is a burden on me. Yeah, it can be. And sometimes they are more prone to take sides than younger kids. They just don't do that. And I don't really know why. I haven't ever really delved into that, but I do know that in my experience, I've seen that, throughout the practice, that even though they're adults, they seem to struggle a little bit more, or in a different way.
Yeah, I wonder why. And taking sides, I think about the fact that they may just feel free to vocalize things, right? I'm grown. I can say that I prefer, I don't like what you did, and I can appreciate what you did. I'm taking your side over the other. That's what I'm thinking.
I think so. And then, this is going to be that classic example that, all the movies and TV shows are on. But then let's just say this. Oh, dad says, Mom, you want to take all his money. Poor dad. Like, oh my gosh, don't take all his money. And you shouldn't be so greedy. And clearly we know where they're hearing that from. And yet they don't know about, his 30-year-old girlfriend, which doesn't mean to say you're being greedy or taking all his money. It's just being like, do you really know what he's done and who he's going to be parading around here when this is over? And what I always share with my clients, with our clients and our team in general, is we support our client and just suggest that they don't share that information despite what their husband is doing, because that, I think, it does more damage long term to your relationship with your children, because they're going to see it, they're going to know. And I just think that children are more prone to want to support their dad because they know your mom's not going anywhere. And that is completely biased and crazy, but it's just the way I feel, because I think that they do treat their mothers disproportionately bad when they're mad and angry and say things, and they really don't carry on that way with their dad as often. And so I think even as adults, and that as the mother, maybe protector, just keep it, as hard as it is, really don't involve them in that. And, that's again where therapy comes into place. And whether they understand or not isn't as important as you sticking up for yourself. And this divorce involves really just the two of you. And if you are getting that kind of backlash from your adult children, the best you can do to insulate yourself so that you don't say something that you will regret, and they're just venting based on clearly information they were fed.
Don't involve the kids. I remember you saying this before on a previous show, but we weren't even talking about adult children. We were talking about the younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
So really, no matter what stage of life you're in, this is between you and your spouse. So keep it to yourself.
I couldn't have said it better. Yep.
You could have.
It doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
That's their parent, they're part of them. There's no good outcome. There's no good outcome. Bad mouthing their dad. And yeah, he should have that same advice, but it's really, there may be a time when you're not in it later on and you're having a heart to heart, one to one conversation, and your kids want to understand, and you're talking from a point of this was in the past, and you can probably talk in a better way that's not tainted one way or another, and you have a little more clarity. And that I think is absolutely appropriate. But when you're in it, I don't think that there's anything beneficial to come out of sharing what's going on or feeling the need to. I know you will feel the need to defend yourself. I know that you will. But it it's just they've already expressed their point of view based on what they heard. I don't think anything you say will change that in that moment.
I'm standing here thinking about listening to these shows and how for some people this could be very soul searching.
I
Just a
would think
thought.
so. I
Yeah.
don't think it's easy to not defend yourself or have your own children kind of feel like they're ganging up on you or siding with your dad. I mean, that's going to be difficult. There's no doubt about it. And I empathize, but I know that there's probably not a lot you're going to say that's going to change their mind, and that really, if you can focus on what you need to during this time, that it typically does play out. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
So you think about this could really be a crisis for them. And it sounds like it's possibly catching them off guard. When you think about it, I don't, it doesn't seem like it should, but maybe it is. It's catching them off guard. They're totally shocked. If they're adults, they don't live there anymore, so that's probably the reason.
I think that, yes, I think you're going to have extremes where they're shocked and you guys did a good job of pretending, but then, you know, and maybe it, not all marriages are horrible, where the kids know they aren't. They just, you grow apart. There's nothing horrific one way or another, no affairs. It's just it's that. And so it can be confusing when there doesn't seem to be an apparent reason. And that's normal, and they just are, because of course, like most of us, I mean, if we're honest, they're thinking, well, how is this going to affect me? I mean, and that's really where that comes from. Wait, now where do I go? You mean I'm going to have to choose between who I'm going to see at the holidays? Like, how is this going to work? And, I'm getting married next year. Like, how is this going to be work? This is going to be awkward. Now, like, those are realistic things that, especially when you can look at it from that perspective, you can say, they're not really mad at me. They're just mad at the way it's going to affect them.
That is a good way to look at it. Yeah, absolutely. And then some children, they'll feel guilty. Like, what did they do wrong?
They may, and especially, if, yeah, and I think so. I mean, maybe if they're like, oh, yeah, I was difficult. I made it harder. I, did this or that. Again, whatever their feelings and whatever they say, it's really coming from a point of how this is affecting me and their perception. And even if they are angry, those emotions typically pass, I think. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I wondered if you were ever going to do this, or we did. And, I've heard that certainly from clients in the past. And in my experience, kids are like, yeah, we were wondering how long it would take or when you'd ever do this.
And yeah, that would be me. That would be me. I was thinking the exact opposite. I would be like, yep, I saw it. So you finally did it.
Right.
Good for you.
Exactly.
It just depends on the child's, how perceptive that child is.
And I think that's a great point, Julie, because like every single one of these things we talked about, you could have you could have each one of those from say your three kids or different kids, and they're going to go through it because they're caught off guard. So they've got to go through that whole cycle of grief as well, because they're going to grieve you two together as what they knew. And that is normal. And that's kind of like they are, no matter how old they are going to go through that. And I think that's fair. And it's just, you've got to let them go through that.
What if you are supporting your adult children? Because that definitely happens.
And that becomes a problem, let me tell you, because legally you aren't, you're not required to. So if you are saying, well, I need this amount of alimony because of course I've got to pay for, Johnny's apartment or Sally's car, and they'll be like, nope, you're going to have to go without. And that can be difficult because many times, in my experience, where the husband's like, well, I'm not paying for that anymore. Go to your mom and, she did this, so I'm not paying for it. So those are hard conversations and that are gonna need to be had. But the reality is, if you've got a certain amount, of the assets in the division, that's really only going to hurt you. And that goes for college too. And, in most cases, parties are able to amicably work it out, figure out, hey, we're going to do this for our kids and we're going to set these things up, let them have X, Y, Z. But, sometimes, parents aren't able to do that. And so there are hard conversations with your kids that you have to have.
Yeah, father says, no, they need to stand on their own 2 feet. I'm only giving you alimony for whatever you need.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
But, you mentioned this earlier, as far as keeping things to yourself. This is something between you and your spouse, so this is where it needs to stay. Don't use your kids as a therapist.
Correct. That is not a fair, that's not fair to place them in that position. And they, kids love their parent. They're just, it's not fair. And they're not going to be that objective anyway. They're going to tell you what you want to hear, most likely. But think about if they're struggling between you and, your husband with hearing too much and you're both oversharing, they're probably really going to opt out and be like, guys, I don't want to talk to either one of you because I feel like I'm being put in the middle. And no one likes to feel that way and be caught between that. And you're right. I think, sometimes there is a tendency because, they're grown up, but it's like, you're still always their mom and dad. So even though they are, an adult, it's still really, it's just a bad idea.
Yeah, and it could just get weird. Just weird. Try to keep the emotion out of it. That's difficult. I know we talked about the emotional versus the rational. That is so difficult. It really is, because it's especially you think about the fact that you have other members of the family, not just your adult children. You also may have grandkids, and you brought this up, birthdays and weddings. I'm getting married next year, and so you can't bring your girlfriend to the wedding. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. You can bring her, but she won't have a chair. Like, that's, you have all these things that you have to think about. But it is, like you said, it's really how it affects them. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and life goes on. And, everybody makes it work or they don't make it work. But if you try to have, best intentions and, just remember, you got to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. Is that really how you want to behave?
Anything else you want to add on this topic?
No, I think we've covered it.
But there are so many other questions that I have, and I'm just looking at the time saying, Julie, you just don't have time for that. Alrighty. So I'll ask them at a different time. Until
There
next
we go.
time,
There's
Heather.
always next week, right?
There is always next week. Yeah. Until next time, Heather.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Women Winning Divorce. We hope you found information to help you navigate your divorce. If you like our show, please take the time to subscribe and provide a 5-star review. If you need more information, please visit our website at womenwinningdivorce.com, where you will find previous episodes and other helpful content. Join us next week as we continue our journey of women winning divorce.
Tobacco-free Florida knows how hard it is to quit nicotine, which is why we offer different quit options to choose from for free, like 24/7 quit coaches available over the phone and free 2-week starter kits of quit aids. We're even experimenting with 80s pop music.
I'm giving you up, giving you up, giving you up. I'm letting you never come back to stop. I'll never come back to stop. I'll never come back. I'm giving you up.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com